A warm welcome, and this is your program Law and Order. So we all buy properties, we all need to put up houses and live freely, and as you all know, ordinarily we are going to purchase a land and build a house there. But modern day society is a little bit different with this limited infrastructure facilities, like having particular lands on our own, and with the busy life schedule we need to have closer places to our workplaces to live nearby, so on and so forth. We need to discuss about newly emerging trends. So as an initiative we are going to discuss about condominium law, and to do the honors we invited Mr. Ian Fernando, Senior Counsel. Sir, thank you very much for joining with us. Right. Okay. So we are going to discuss about condominium law, and so to give an exposure, what is that condominium law?
Condominium law is basically where you build on a particular land a couple of apartments or parcels of apartments which can be sold or rented. That law came into existence far back as 1970.
Right.
Where it recognizes the apartment law and the procedure in which you can build it, and in the procedure where you can sell it and or rent it.
Right.
The principle that a building stands on a particular piece of land, and if you are the owner of that land, that the building accrues title to that land, came in the case of 3 new law reports, page 161, in where Haramanis versus Silva. It was decided that when you build on someone else's land, that right of ownership comes to the land owner. It was further discussed in the principle of jus superficies, where in 61 new law report at page 282, in the case of Kanagaratnam versus Suppaya, also it was recognized that when you build on someone else's land, that particular apartment accrues title to the land that is which is it built on.
Right. So when normally ordinarily, as previous day examples, we purchase a land, we build a house on that particular land. Right. So the landowner is liable, or he is the owner of that particular house. But in apartment ownership law, that means this condominium property, that is not the principle that we are discussing. So what is this apartment ownership law?
The apartment ownership law recognizes where on one property of a developer, for example, the property is developed by one person and construction is done by another person, and the owner of that particular company which may be owning the land, they all three come together to erect a vertical structure called a condominium. So the developer has to be in consultation with the company who is building it, and also he may be the financer at some time, and accordingly they formulate an agreement and go into the construction of a condominium building.
Right. Okay. That means like if I am the person who wants to build a particular property, a condominium property, I'm just going to put that particular building on a land of my own title, or I'm going to rent it or whatever I do, and I'm going to give it to another party to build. So myself, the other party who was building, and there are some people might having that interest to purchase. Right. So you talked about financing. So
now,
how the financing?
when you said about the purchasers trying the interest in in buying the property, first there is something called a provisional condominium plan, which has to be drawn up and registered in the land registry after so many approvals. There is also what you call a semi condominium plan, which is a half constructed building which is on paper. Then you get finally the condominium plan, which also is the final plan, which has to also have certain requirements of registration. All those three plans have different systems or different criteria in registration. Now, answering your question whether you can buy a condominium before it's built, on the provisional plan you can buy it provided it's registered in the land registry.
Right. So, but I don't have money. Can I finance myself from a bank?
Yes, you can ask a bank to finance it according to what you have, but the bank will go into your salary account and see that only 40% can be given as a loan. and he might give a housing loan for a 20-year-old period of time depending on your salary particulars.
Yes.
So coming back to the semi condominium plan,
Right.
which is a halfly built constructed building that also can be sold if it's registered the particular plan in the relevant land registry. Of course, finally the condominium plan and the registration of that empowers the condominium to get underway, and they should, within 3 months of the registration of the condominium, they should have a management corporation, have a meeting to run the particular condominium by the people who have already purchased, or even some of the people who are there in the company that owns the property.
Right. Okay. So you talked about the semi condominiums and everything. Are there any different types of condominium properties?
All condominium properties are very much similar, but sometimes the management authority, the rules and regulations might differ.
Right.
As I said, in this field of condominium apartments, there are 3 types of law that takes place. Sorry, one is the apartment ownership law.
Right.
Other one is the condominium law. The other condominium management authority law.
Right.
The other one is the municipality. So those 3 regulations or those 3 acts must be followed carefully in constructing a condominium.
Right. So you talk about the registration of the condominium plan. So can you just lay out the proper procedure again to
Each procedure between the provisional plan and the semi condominium plan and the condominium plan proper differ. And if you do not register them, you have been asked or you will be charged in the magistrate's court with a fine of 50,000 rupees, plus for every day that you are contravening the law, another 1,000 rupees in addition.
Right.
That the company who owns a condominium will have to pay.
Okay. So like, sir, I'm a customer, I'm a potential customer who willing to buy a particular small unit of that particular condominium property. What are the things that I should consider?
So if you are buying it, I said you can purchase on a provisional condominium plan. That is not an outright sale. That's only a sales agreement.
Right.
Because the parcel that you are going to buy is still not finished. However, if you are going under the semi condominium plan or the condominium plan, then you have to check the title of the land, of course, and the management agreement that is there, and see that the parcel of land that you are buying is properly depicted in the schedule of the deed. Most often the condominium authority, the owners of the condominium plan, write the deed and want you to sign. They incorporate all the notarial and legal fees, stamp fees in that particular agreement. In that agreement, each apartment, there is a zenith between 2 floors. If you cut it halfway, that is called the zenith point. So the downstairs portion, when you go to the top roof level, there is a zenith, not roof, there is a slab level.
Yes.
The other half of that slab level is owned by the first floor people.
Right.
So if the division is say 12 inches, 6 inches of that zenith comes to the lower tenant, and the other 6 inches go to the tenant on the first floor.
Right.
So those must be properly described in the agreement or agreement to sell or the conveyance that you are going to do, and also the common amenities are also sometimes spelled out to give you the reason that you can use those with the permission of the management corporation.
Right.
And if the management corporation finds that you have misused those areas which are common amenities or elements that you are allowed to use, you will be found fault with, and the management authority is a legal entity. They can have an inquiry in their own premises and or after that prosecute you in the Magistrates Court of Sri Lanka.
Right. So you talked about common elements. So can you just explain us a bit more about that particular common elements, sir?
Now we see the common elements. Sometimes there are staircases, roadways, pathways, then air conditioned ducts, the security hut, the playground for the children, for the car park if it's not allocated from unit to unit. There are various types of common elements that are used.
Right.
So those elements are owned by the condominium company, but you can use that and with reasonable access to all those particular facilities.
Right. So that means they should be properly mentioned in the agreement that we can use.
That is so.
Right. So in some agreements there might be certain restrictions. You can't use these particular elements.
Yes. For example, if there is a swimming pool, they might say that after 9 o'clock in the night there aren't people to supervise you using the pool, so the pool is closed.
Right.
And that in the condominium management fund, all those common elements are funded and repaired, and maintenance is done with the fund that they have.
Right. So what is that condominium management fund, sir?
The condominium management fund is where each one contributes some part of the rent which they or the purchase price, where they have a fund for any repairs of the building, for any maintenance work of the building, for anything to be looked upon by the, what shall I say, customer giving a particular complaint.
Right.
Those matters and administrative matters are run by that particular fund. Then also we have the sinking fund. That is in case there is a major fire or the building collapses or there is some leakage in a couple of floors, and those floors will have to be re-repaired or repaired, then the sinking fund money is used to help the participants or the condominium tenants to put that particular place back into proper place.
Right. That means there are two separate funds. Right. That means if in a certain disaster or any calamity, there is a proper fund to administer and properly implement those conditions to the previous status, and the other funds to maintain the stuff that we discussed.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So then any like collectives, like that means the tenants or the people who are living, are there any societies or any collectives?
Yes, as I mentioned, that condominium authority, the condominium management committee has to be formulated 3 months from the opening of the building. So there can be committees of the residents plus some gentlemen or ladies from the condominium management authority who is paid by the company to look into those matters. For examples, we find that when you are building a condominium, the next door resident complains that certain particles of dust and cement come upon his premises. Then you make your complaint at the police station against the management authority.
Right.
You bring them before the law. So in such scenarios, you are supposed to have a green mesh going right up the building according to UDA law, so that no particles that will fall or iron rods that may be fall onto your building and cause damage to you.
Right.
However, we have seen that though you have that green mesh,
Yes.
smaller particles will come and land on the opposite condominium, and I have seen cases wherein the condominium who had done that as a fault, the management company who was responsible for that, has undertaken to repair the next door condominium by whitewashing it and getting those particles out.
Right.
Also, when constructing, when pieces of iron fall, rods fall on the opposing house or on vehicles on the road,
We recently have seen.
then they are liable to pay them in damages. The principle of Rylands versus Fletcher is then embodied in that. Basically, what you have on your land, if you send it to someone else's land and there is any damage caused, you are responsible.
இந்த மழலையின் குரல் உங்களோட வீட்டில் கேட்கலையா? குழந்தையின்மை தொடர்பான பிரச்சனைகளை சந்திக்கக்கூடிய அன்பான உறவுகளுக்கு ஒரு செய்தியை சொல்ல போறோம்.
வணக்கம்.
குழந்தை இல்லாத தம்பதியர்களுக்கான சிறப்பு நிகழ்ச்சி டாக்டர் அருணாவுடன் ஒவ்வொரு ஞாயிற்றுக்கிழமையும் காலை 11 மணிக்கு உங்கள் நேத்ரா தொலைக்காட்சியில் காணத் தவறாதீர்கள்.
When discussing those scenarios, I feel like when something happens against us, we can sue them, can be sued. What is the relationship
Yes,
there?
in the management authority can sue you in the magistrates court, for non-compliance. And the district court, we have seen jurisdiction where if there is a dispute within the management authority, that they go to court and get a resolution, and thereafter in the other forums we have seen writs, like in the appeal court we have seen writs regarding condominium properties being built.
Right.
The latest scenario is when they are building such condominium buildings, the light and air for the neighbor is somewhat hampered. So if you have been there after they have built the particular building, you cannot cause to complain.
Right.
But once you are there and they are building a construction which is too close to your house, which has caused cracks to your building, you are allowed to go to civil court, the district court, and sue them for the particular cracks. NBRO will come in, a national authority, and assess what those cracks are on those buildings, and then you will evaluate a damages case in the district court to ask for from the condominium that is being built next door. However, the light and air situation is gazetted, and according to gazette you have to show that they are contravening it. And also when they are building the sound pollution, also they are allowed only to work during certain business hours.
Right.
If there are sound pollutions out of that, you can complain, or even you can go to court and get an injunction restraining them from building until they adhere to the proper laws on the times they are allowed to build.
Right. Okay. So when discussing the developer's side, the legal background, so with your experience, how can you comment on that, sir?
At the moment there is a bit of a situation due to the situation now prevailing, because the condominium company which owns the condominium, which has sold a apartment, finds that the construction costs have gone up. And they are in a quandary how they can recoup that money from the particular client, unless they have a specific clause in the agreement allowing them to do so. So many condominiums have come to a standstill because of the funding situation.
Right.
That is what I see in the legal scenario at the moment.
Okay, right. So then when with regard to that development and the other issues, garbage issue and the security and certain development issues, and there are many issues actually, as in like concluding them.
Yes.
So can you
when you talk about the garbage issues, they are having a particular system of garbage disposal. When you are talking about the security issue, I must mention you a case that was done in New Jersey in the Supreme Court, where it was termed that you are not entitled to walk into a condominium building and go from apartment to apartment distributing election material. That's a very interesting case,
Right.
where the Supreme Court in New Jersey has held that you are not entitled to go from apartment to apartment and hand over or give handbills regarding the forthcoming election.
Right.
That's a very interesting idea. They got an order and that was stopped. But however, other traders who want to go to a condominium building to trade something will have to necessarily get permission from the occupants before they come in.
Right, right. So with that case, it's really interesting. So even like to enter in and like even visiting houses and distributing something else, trading, it's not possible within that property.
No.
Right. If so, we need to get special permission.
From the condominium management company that runs the particular condominium and its residents.
Right. In any case, like although the what do you call the management people, management authority grants permission, if the residence isn't like, nothing can do.
Nothing can.
Right. Okay. So when it comes to the other internal issues and the certain surrounding facts, so how they are being managed? And
When you are saying internal issues, if there are issues regarding the common elements, then they will have an inquiry in the condominium management authority and resolve them. For example, if you have a staircase that leads to a dish antenna, and that dish antenna cable is necessarily always been removed by the person closest to it, then that can be an issue, and those matters are sorted out sometimes in the police station, but actually those matters should go first to the condominium authority, or the before that to the condominium management committee.
Right.
They should only organize such things and have a clear-cut policy about their electricity meters, their water meters. I have seen some condominium properties, they just have an electricity meter and they divide it equally among all those people who are living there.
Right.
So some may be a high usage, others may be a low usage.
Right.
So those matters have come to court and they have been asked to be resolved by court.
Okay, so that means like we need to have clear, transparent electricity supply, water supply, and certain other common things when distributed. We have to have a clear, transparent system to govern them. Right. In any case, like certain breach of laws happen, you said about the management authority and the committees and the courts. There's a particular flow in that manner. Even like without directly going and filing a court case, there's a proper. Can you just lay down a certain procedure that we need to follow, sir?
So when there is a issue between two residents or with the condominium management company and the particular resident, you are supposed to first give it in writing to the management authority who manages or who manages a particular condominium, to the condominium office, and thereafter notice should be issued on the opponent and they have been held for inquiry. If at that stage they have only powers to settle the dispute, they have no powers more than that. If that falls apart, then the next thing is the condominium management committee might have to see who is wrong in this dispute and file action in the provisions of the law in the magistrate's court.
Right. Okay. So in any case, if my fundamental rights are breached, what can I proceed?
Fundamental rights are normally between two people from a government authority. So if it's a condominium authority, you cannot say that your fundamental rights are breached because the condominium company is not a government company. If it's a government affiliated company, then you can go on a fundamental rights application. But if your rights are infringed, like I said, dust particles coming from the next door building that is being constructed, or some one is having a pet in the particular building when you are not supposed to have pets, then you can make that complaint to the management company that you are dissatisfied with the terms that that person is having a cat or a dog in his premises when those are prohibited.
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to move to some simpler questions in terms of this condominium property, sir. Like I'm going to buy a condominium property and now I'm financing myself from a bank. So discussing the agreements and the formalities with the bank, they will directly pay the some amount like the 40% or the net average, as you said, calculated, being granted as a loan to that particular person who is in charge of that particular condominium property. And like I'm going to pay that particular sum to the bank or the owner of the condominium property.
That depends on the condominium ownership, who owns it. Sometimes they might sell the particular unit to the bank and recover all their money upfront, and then you will have to pay the bank the particular installments every month, so that the bank is fulfilled of its obligation where he has lent you the money.
Right. So in any case, like we are paying the developer or the owner of the condominium property, and he is liable to pay that amount to the bank if he is not paying that money to the bank on behalf of us. Like sometimes we are at default or the loan is being there, he is a huge arrears. So how can we proceed?
Then the bank has authority to seize the property or go to court under parate execution. Depends on they might, if it's a money recovery action, if it's a simple loan that they have given to you to buy the house, then it will be a money recovery action. Otherwise, if it's a particular agreement with the bank, they might consider having a board resolution in the bank and do a parate execution and recover the property back.
Right. Okay.
Because they have fulfilled the terms with the management company or the owner by paying the full sum on behalf of you. So if you have defaulted, then the bank will take strictures against you.
Right. Okay. So the last question, sir. Like you said that when the repairs are being done, there is a formality that they need to fulfill those things and restore it to the normalcy that we had already enjoying the thing previously. So in any case, like if we need to move out from that apartment for that repairs to be done, are they liable to give us a separate unit or a separate place to live at that particular time?
It depends on the contract you have with the management company. If you have bought the premises outright and you are inconvenienced, they will have to find you some alternative accommodation in another building, or otherwise compensate you for the amount that you have been inconvenienced, since you have got to move out for any repair.
Right. Okay. So we had a fruitful, interesting and a good conversation with regard to condominium property, because these days people try to move to condominium properties, like because here in areas where huge populations are living, it's very difficult to have a separate land and a separate house built for our own. So there are certain limitations and consequences. I think you might have a clear understanding about the condominium law that governs this property, the apartment ownership law, the condominium management authority, and the other details that we discussed. So thank you very much, sir, Mr. E.N.J. Fernando, Senior Counsel, for doing the honors with us with this condominium law. And thank you very much, you all, ladies and gentlemen, for watching the program Law and Order. Stay tuned for future programs. We'll be discussing more important areas in the field of law. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day.
The apartment